Hi, I'm meteorologist Dave Epstein, and in this edition of Growing Wisdom, we're going to talk about keeping your pond open to protect your fish for the winter. So this is the pond, and if you've been watching videos for a long time, you know that the pond is kind of one of the focal points of my yard. I do have fish in there. Right now they're probably down very low. It's about a 4-foot deep middle of the pond. And the fish tend to, in the winter, whether it's koi or other types of cold-tolerant fish, they go down into the bottom, they'll stay in a little group, and they'll go to the warmest part, which, believe it or not, is at the bottom. So the warmer water goes down to the bottom, the colder water stays at the top. But if you don't do something, it's going to freeze over in northern climates, and it will get completely frozen in ice. And the reason this is important is because the gases of things breaking down in the water will not be able to escape if it's frozen solid. So as you can see here, this is a smaller pond. There's no fish in it, so I don't worry about it, but it is frozen solid. So back to this pond, and what you can see is that we have an air bubbler here, and that air bubbler is basically exactly that. It's pushing air through a tube, and I'll show you what the machine looks like in a second, and that continues to bubble air into the water. Now you might think, wow, you're aerating the water. We're actually not. What we're doing is we're keeping it ice-free, and that's the important piece. By the ice being free, you create an area for all those gases to escape, and therefore they don't concentrate in the pond, and they also allow the fish to continue to live in the pond for the winter. This will also help other things in a pond, such as frogs. So some key things about an aerator. One is you don't want to put it all the way at the bottom because you're going to start to mix that warm water up from the bottom, and you don't want to do that. You don't want to change what's called the thermocline of the water, the way that you have the cold getting cooler and then finally the warmest water down low where your critters will kind of keep going for the winter. So I leave it anywhere from about, say, 10 inches down to 20 inches in the pond, and that's sort of a sweet spot. I'd say a foot is ideal. And what this does is that moving water doesn't tend to freeze. So by doing this, even though the entire pond can freeze over, you'll end up with probably about a 2-foot area where it's not frozen, and that's enough to let the gases escape. If it does freeze over completely, you may get a little dome right around where we are pushing the water up, but what will happen is the air will escape. It'll sort of push itself through the ice on the edges around the rocks, and that's really good because, again, the gases are escaping. I want to show you what this looks like. So as you can see, here's what this looks like. It's basically a disc. It's pushing a lot of air through this. It needs to be fairly industrial or not one of the tiny aerators because there's just not enough air to keep it from freezing. And also, some of you may have some of those home deicers. Those use a lot more electricity than this. So that's the other reason I like this, is because it uses less electricity. Now, the machine itself, which is pumping the air in, I have underneath this rock. And this is a fake rock. And take a look at it from a little distance, and you can see you almost can't notice whether it's a real rock or not. And as I flip it, you can actually see where the machine is, the aerator. And the other great thing about putting something over it, it doesn't have to be some fancy rock like this, is that in the coldest of weather, you're not pulling that cold air directly out of the air and pushing it into the pond. The air underneath this rock will be a little bit warmer, and that's also a good thing because there's the heat in the machine as well. This particular aerator ran just under $100, which is fairly expensive, but something like one of those heater discs plus the electricity use will quickly be more expensive than this in a matter of one season. So if you do have a large pond and you do have fish, one way to help protect them is by using an aerator. It will keep a nice hole in the ice throughout the winter and keep your fish really happy. For Growing Wisdom, I'm Dave Epstein.